Hey, you are listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that educates and engages individuals on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia, and on this episode, we're challenging you guys to grab your cowboy hat because we're talking about the Forever Purge. Hope you guys enjoy. Ever after, Brandon, ever after, the fifth and quote final installment of the Purge is here.
Yeah. Let's see if it stays dead, because, things have stayed dead forever. But this movie is eternal because purge forever, purify forever.
Honestly, this film is... I'm so excited to be doing this podcast because this film... Oh, Brandon now has a cat. Hi, Pickles.
He just attacked my shoulder. I didn't expect that.
I'm really excited to jump into this because this was one of the biggest surprises I've had on my cinema journey this year. We're coming at this from two different places, not only as viewers of The Purge, but also in kind of where we land on a lot of more controversial topics that this film divulges into. So, Brandon has never actually seen, this is his second Purge film ever.
Yeah, I just watched the first Purge movie last week. And I enjoyed it for the most part, but I was hoping everything would get better. And from what I've heard from you, everything does get better. And then from this movie today I watched, wow. So I'm looking forward to watching the rest of them after this.
So I did a over on our TikTok, which you guys can follow. It's at Victims and Villain. Wait, let me put the S. But I talked about my ratings for the top 5, and I definitely appreciate this series a lot more now. I was a huge anti-Purge watcher for a long time. I would watch the movies but not necessarily enjoy them, and a large portion of them is because I'm convinced that I just didn't understand what screenwriter and creator James DeMacco, who not only has written all 5 films but also directed the first 3 films, what he was trying to do and say with this series. And over the last year, I've really taken a lot of time and energy on like self-reflection and what I believe as far as politics, race, gender identity, sexual identity, and kind of my viewpoints on things like race relationships, immigration, LGBT community, and just a number of other things. And I feel like this franchise and these films they explore these things so profoundly and so deeply while also offering you compelling characters and an entertaining story to do it through.
Oh yeah, like go back to the first movie because that's the one I've seen up until this one. Like, I wasn't super interested through like Ethan Hawke's character, but it's like the guy with the main antagonist. Like, that still got me interested. Like the things they had to say, the reasons for purging, and in this movie, it touched really big on race and diversity, and it was really cool to see like different sides of all the characters. And of course, we'll get into it in a little bit, but just the way that someone who had a difference with a certain race comes together with that and comes wanting to fight the purge.
We'll get into that in just a little bit, but to your point, the first film with Ethan Hawke really laid a great foundation for what this series was going to be. It gave you enough about who the new founding fathers of America were, but also at the same time, really the quote good that the Purge has kind of gotten or has done in the 9 years since it's been laid its foundation. And then they set you up for the journey of Leo's character, who's Frank Grillo in Anarchy and its sequel Election Year. and you really got to see what the Purge as a concept was able to do. And I think what's even greater is really makes this the next 4 films in the series, including this one, so compelling, is that you're studying different angles of how violence affects an individual's mental health. And so for Anarchy and Election Year, you have a grieving father who lost a son to drunk driving, and how he's been processing that for grief, and kind of also realizing that vengeance isn't the answer. And so you have a character journey that's working to kind of find his peace with humanity through the course of that. And then the first Purge, which came out in 2018, it's the prequel to the entire series, really kind of comments on, to your point, it establishes race and redlining for one, poverty-stricken areas, and it just does a really good job. And I would want to throw this out there: if you guys want more Purge after this, please go check out the episode from the Ghouls Next Door on the first Purge, because they did a great job at really dissecting that film. And but this one, I think in particular, is really interesting because it comes at a very timely discovery, so to say, in our country, where you kind of have this like split. And we try to avoid politics as much as possible, but I feel like it's impossible to talk about this film and not talk about some of the politics that have inspired this film. So this film is a direct sequel to 2016's Election Year, which really was kind of like the entire thing was basically the presidential candidate that was trying to end the Purge was on the run to not be purged. And, spoiler alert, in the end, she ends up actually being, well, I won't spoil it for Brandon. But her main platform is to end the Purge. And so this film kind of takes off where her presidency ends and kind of how it begins in the beginning of this one. And it's interesting because this film, I feel like with Trump more recently being in office, that the conversation of immigration has been on the rise. And this film kind of feels so timely because it really brings into question, really, there's a great scene that we'll talk about here in a few minutes, but what is, quote, the American dream? What is the, American, what does it mean to be an American? Is it everything, that other countries think it is? Or is it just this kind of like grandeur that has been, stuck in a time capsule from the 50s? And then you kind of also, how does immigration affect us as Americans? And it also really stems really deeply on like white supremacy, and also to a point, like white supremacy, I think, is kind of the big theme of this underlining, and kind of like how those two viewpoints of immigration and white supremacy really end up conflicting with one another.
Oh yeah, like, again, I had a knowledge of the movies, the 3 before this one, but it hit home real quick that there was going to be a big line between certain belief systems. And when I was watching this movie, I couldn't help but think, like, wow, like this basically just happened like last year, or was late last year, like people like rushing the Capitol or whatever, all that stuff. And it's just like, like, it hit me with some reality. It's like, knowing that happened and how crazy it got, like, I'm not saying a purge could ever happen, but something like that could happen, like, realistically. Like, you never know. And like stuff like that happened with the Capitol, and seeing this movie, like, it reminded me so much of that. And it's like, this could actually be a reality if things got really out of hand.
I am 100% in agreement with you, and I watch scary movies to an upteenth degree, and they're my favorite genre to read, favorite podcasts to listen to, favorite audiobooks to check out, favorite books to read. Like, I am a horror nut. I love it, and it's my favorite genre. I think like my top 5 favorite films are 3 of them at least are horror films, but I'm also the in the audience that I've watched so much of this that these films kind of don't really scare me anymore. Like, I'm just here for the entertainment value. But I went back and actually rewatched all the Purge films in preparation for Forever, and the idea to podcast on them kind of comes out as a product of that rewatch and how impacted I was by Forever. And I just have to say that, like, the Purge films are films that truly do terrify me. Because to your point about the Capitol being rushed, like, how far are we off from being in a world where there is some sort of government figure like the NFFA, or where the Purge is actually going to take place?
Yeah, because there wasn't much security was doing to stop those people. So it's like, am I saying that a group of just regular people are going to overthrow the army? I don't know, But yeah, like, I get what you're saying with the horror aspect, like, because, like, my favorite horror movie of all time is The Strangers, which is something that could actually happen, and that's what makes it so scary to me. So, from seeing this movie and the first one, I get what you're saying, because this is very real, could be real horror, and that's what's terrifying about it.
We even look at a film last year like The Hunt. That was one of my favorite films from last year, and The Hunt is like, it has a subplot where, like, all the people that are, quote, being hunted are being hunted because of their activity on the dark web or saying things online. It's so easy nowadays to offend somebody, and that's why when we're doing the podcast, I'm always like, man, like, I'm really careful about the things that I say, and the tweets that I'm putting out, or the Instagram things that I'm doing, and because I think you are very close to having the Purge come do a reality. Like, I live in Virginia, and I know you are in the dirty South. Family Force 5 reference. Just want to throw that out there. Brandon's laughing right now.
Oh boy. Did you get your Hulk hands for that one?
Yeah, I did. I actually came across those last week at a thrift store. I was like, I could be just like, I can't remember the guy's name. I could just be like the guy from Family Force 5.
That's the American dream right there.
But no, like, I guess that's a good question, a good segue to kind of like move away from like the horror aspects, like being in, now, like, you're getting ready to be married in a few months. I've been married for 7 years at this point. Like, what would you classify as the American dream? Because I feel like our generation doesn't necessarily know what that is. And I feel like we have things like student debts and, just terrible, like, minimum wage that make those evident.
Well, I grew up, the American dream was a guy named Dusty Rhodes that wore polka dots on his singlet. I just broke Josh.
It took me a second to realize who you were referring to, but I got it. Continue. American Dream.
Then Maylene wrote 4 albums about it. No, but to me, man, I mean, like, I grew up hearing that tossed around. This time, American Dream. To me, American Dream to me is just living your life stable, a good job, a good family, a good house over your head, and just making it through your life until the day you die. Like, that's the dream to me, just being stable with someone you love, with your family, with a house over your head, and a job, retirement, yada, yada, yada. That's it to me. Just persevering through until the end. That's it to me.
And I think that's really what our generation has kind of come to know about what the American dream is because to us, American dream is making sure that all of your bills are paid and that you are able to make it through to the next payday. Like that you have continuing like a roof over your head, clothes on your back, running water, food to eat. Whereas when you look at some of our parents or our grandparents' generation, it was white picket fence, 2.5 kids, cat, a dog, leave it to beaver lifestyle. Like that was the American dream, and I feel like for so long, like it's still argued that it's still possible, and it's like, no, like student debt is a real thing, and our crisis right now is a very real thing, and I don't think that this generation, the generation that's coming up after us, are ever going to be able to see that. I think the American dream is now shifted, and you've arrived after paying off debts for 25 years.
This is the best dream to live, but hey, that's a part of it. Cancel student debt. Oh.
Yeah, for real. Like we live in a time where cancel culture is a very real thing. Why can't we cancel student debt?
Yeah, or why can't we cancel beef jerky being so expensive? Lower it.
I guess that's a real thing in the dirty South.
It actually is. There's actually people have actually argued about, like, if you're going to drop gas prices, drop the beef jerky prices. We're tired of paying $10 for 3 strips.
I used to get beef jerky all the time when I was growing up in Maryland, and I think my dad and I came to the realization that it's a little bit more expensive on the upfront, but after a couple of sessions, it's actually cheaper just to make your own jerky, and it makes your house smell great.
Yeah, we used to make deer jerky a lot, and deer jerky is incredible. But this podcast just went from the-purge to beef jerky pretty fast.
Oh, don't worry, it's coming back to the-purge. All right, so we haven't really gotten into spoilers yet. We've talked about the thematics, but just kind of some kind of like quick. So since this is kind of also our review podcast, we'll kind of take it back to just give me some general thoughts and kind of where you would rank this on our Rorschach rating scale.
So you told me I didn't really need to see the other films to understand this movie and love it, and it fills everything in for you need to know. And to me, like, the complaints I had for the first one was that I wish it was more crazy, more chaotic, more violent, and I feel like I got that. I got what I wanted, and it's to me, there was never a dull moment from the time I sat down and started the movie till the end. It was fun, it was fast, it had a lot of heart and a lot of just mischief and chaos in it. And if you love that kind of stuff and love horror that could be real and love scaring yourself, perfect. And me personally, I gave it a 5, and it's number 2 of my movies of the year so far, behind Psycho Gorman. So that's where it ranks for me.
Man, I haven't even put this into my top. Currently, this was the 100th movie I've seen this year. From this year, I haven't put it into this. I don't know where it ranks for me yet, but I definitely think it's at least top 20. If not top 10. I, much like you, I really enjoyed this film. I thought that the acting was great, the tension was great, the direction was great, and I really want to talk about the director because I think for this film and also First Purge, it earned me a great deal of respect for James D'Amaco, who is the writer on these films and also was the director of the first 3. I really, really have such a divine respect for him. But no, I really think that this film just pushes it continues to really push the narrative that the other 4 films have set up and brings this franchise to new heights. And to your point, which is one of the reasons I wanted to really bring you and do this podcast with you, is that The Purge are really great films that stand alone by themselves, but because like you said, like, they also give you context for how that story fits into the larger narrative of the ongoing series. but you don't necessarily need to be invested into these series to truly appreciate a standalone entry. I think it works really well in that regard, and the Forever Purge is a great example because, like I said, like the opening monologue really helps you to kind of understand, but it also changes up the formula from the previous 3 entries that we've gotten before this. And so for me, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. I think this movie is not necessarily a perfect film, but I think it's necessarily it's an important film. It has a great commentary, and it delivers the horror and has some really, really exciting kills in this movie.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think why I ranked it so high is because going back to like my musical taste, I love like beautiful chaos. That makes sense. Like something that's so chaotic, but it's also artistic and beautiful at the same time. And I feel like this movie to me was that. Like it fit like it fit the aesthetic of me listening to Blessed Murder Kiss a Child by Norma Jean. Like it's just beautiful, chaotic. It's art in a very chaotic, crazy way, and it did it for me. And yeah, I loved every bit of it. It was incredible.
So this is going to be the official spoiler warning for you guys. If you guys have not seen the Forever Purge, we're getting ready.
Muted.
So this is going to be your official spoiler warning with that. If you guys have not seen the Forever Purge, it is now playing at a local cinema near you. We are going to pick this thing apart and really talk about just everything that this film has. And I want to kind of back up to what I was originally saying about the director for this film in particular. His name is I'm going to so butcher this name. Evado Valier Gout,
which is very painful.
But yeah, so I want to talk about him for a brief second and just kind of talk about his backgrounds. I might have lied. I actually don't have any. But he was in like when everything kind of started happening for the development of this project, he was announced that he was handpicked. Well, I can't say handpicked, but let me back that up. This is your official spoiler warning. If you guys have not seen The Purge, this is your official spoiler warning. If you guys have not seen the Forever Purge, we are getting ready to just pick it apart and dissect it. So please go support your local cinemas and go check it out. And I wanted to kind of walk back what I was just talking about for a few seconds ago and talk about the director on this one, whose name is Evado Gout. And I'm super sorry if I mispronounced that name, but he is it's interesting because he actually got his start, or he was hired for this project based on a Natural Geographic series that he was doing back in 2016 on Mars, which is if I remember correctly, is actually so it is basically, this is coming from its Wikipedia. It was launched in a streaming format on November 1st, 2016. It blends elements of real interviews with a fictional story of a group of astronauts as they land on Mars. And so that blending of like fact and fiction and kind of like almost like traditional storytelling with that documentary-esque style, I feel like he brought a lot of that intensity to the direction of the way that the certain action sequences were shot in this film. And I feel like it was very much a gripping tale, like the entire time when they're like running, and even when in like the last little bit when it's like the shoot off, and with also kind of throwing in some arrows there, that's that last standoff, I guess is a more appropriate word. feels so much more intense and natural because there's a rawness to the way that it's shot.
I didn't know that he's the same guy that did Mars. I've seen a few episodes of that, and it looked really cool. It was good. I was looking here. He also worked on the '96 film Romeo and Juliet, which is a gem. I was going to throw it out there. But yeah, the way his cinematography went. Sorry, with this film, it gave such a beautiful tone to some, like that last standoff you mentioned. Like it looks so like more. I don't know what's the word I'm working for here. It just grabbed me in a more of like a landscape feel, I guess, if I'm to say. Making sense, because I've seen Mars and it was shot very well.
So I've not actually seen Mars, but just I've seen things that are like that concept where you're blending in actual like documentary footage / interviews with a storytelling narrative or a dramatization approach to the way in which you're telling your story. And I feel like a lot of those characters that we're spending time with here really have a lot of those qualities. I think one scene in particular that is really dynamic in terms of kind of that intimacy that you get with documentaries is the scene where they're on the road and everyone's asleep except for Juan and Dylan, and Juan just looks at him. He's like, flat out asks him, are you a racist? And he's like, he gives this answer that's kind of like beating around the bush, that he's not a racist, but that he has these learned quote tendencies is kind of how I'll phrase it. But just the way that is seen is shot, and like the intimacy and the vulnerability between the characters really has a lot of those qualities that I've seen in other documentaries.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in this show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Yes, that was a really, really good example of that right there. I love that scene a lot, and I love the whole scene just together with like the dudes come up with a bike and the girl's like, "Wait, hold on, I got this." And she puts the flag up. It's like Purge forevermore. Like, oh, she's one of us. Like,
Fall back.
I love that whole scene.
Fall back, yeah. But I think one of the things that I want to kind of pick up is where we're looking at, in particular, kind of our introduction, so to say, to the Forever Purge. So, like I said previously, before we got into spoilers, there's a sense of abandonment of the film's regular formulas that we've seen. So, even in the first Purge, you spend a little bit of time with these characters, and then before the quote commencement of the purge, and then the entire movie from that point on is the 12 hours through the purge. Whereas this film, the first act commences when the first act ends. The first act is the transition to the second act is actually the commencement of the purge, and it really showed you that this was going to be a different film. And I really appreciated that film because it allowed a lot of that chaos and that insanity that you were talking about, Brandon, that was so missing from the first one, to really elevate itself to new heights, but also open itself up for new conversations.
Oh yeah, for sure. That was done really well.
And I think for that in particular, it brings up this point of, you know, the purge was this thing that was given to this universe by the new founding fathers of America, that the entire thing was to basically, we're going to legalize all crime with, you know, a few exceptions for 12 hours, and it's going to help lower you know, poverty rates. It's going to help lower you know, unemployment, and I forget like what else that they'd kind of talked about, but there's kind of like more like unity in America because you have this like one night a year to just kind of do whatever you want, and you're gonna purge. And you know, there's a lot of, mostly this franchise focuses on murder, but there have been other instances where, you know, there's a scene in the first purge where like a couple is having sex on a car, and one of the other characters is like, that's technically illegal, so they're using their right to purge. Another guy's like trying to break into ATM, and he's trying to steal all the money from it. Again, the election year has like people trying to like loot and riot. You know, all these things are legal, but we just focus on murder, which is kind of a small gripe that I have of how shallow this series can be at times. But I digress. But that's the whole concept of it, and the entire concept behind the second and third acts is this quote Forever Purge. The idea is, if you give someone a little bit, they're going to go a mile with it, and they're going to ask for more and more and more, to the point where you're starting to see news coverages throughout the course of the film as this new purge is starting, this Forever Purge, and saying, you know, the NFFA are basically saying that they can't protect anyone, like you're on your own, basically. And yeah, I think it goes to, you know, some of what we see in our own culture nowadays, where you have so much people that just feel entitled to have so much that is owed to them for such a little bit of price. Like, they're never satisfied. And I'm speaking to myself as well. Like, I definitely go through times where I'm just not satisfied. And I think this film does a great job at kind of exploring the insatiable appetites that we as Americans have.
Well, I was born and raised in a stand your ground state, and if the purge happened, it'd get crazy here because there's a lot of entitled people in Alabama, and I'd dig myself in a hole and hide there for a while. It'd be fun.
But I mean, do you think that, like, if we did have like the purge, do you think that we would see, because essentially in the purge timeline, this is, I would imagine, taking place like 35 years after the purge has been basically explored, because the purge was expunged after election year, and then it was brought back. So essentially, you have to guess that there's probably like 5 to 10 years between that time. So it's about 35 years after the after the original intention, like, experiment of the purge. Do you think that, like, we would have people that be like, one night's not enough, to where, like, I need like more of it, kind of almost like the way that addiction kind of like starts to, you know, I don't want to say train your brain, but like starts to habitually have these things where like you feel like you need more.
Oh, absolutely. There are people that would want more. It's like here, deer hunting season is a very sacred thing in Alabama, and these guys hate when it ends. And there are guys who will actually go out there and try to get away with it, doing it after deer season, could get in trouble. It's because it's an addiction. Like pulling that trigger is something that's an addiction. They can get away with it during deer season, and when it's taken away, they're just like, ugh. So it's like, oh yeah, one night would be enough for a lot of people. They would be selfish about it. They would try to sneak it in, try to go to the Capitol and riot, but we want more, and just stuff like that. Like it would get out of hand because, like you said, it'd be selfish. One night would not be enough at all, I don't think.
No, and so you get the Forever Purge. You get this idea and this concept that here you have an uprising that is starting to take place because Americans want to have the thing that is, coined to be an American right, an American tradition. So much of the marketing of this series has been the Purge is an American tradition, and here you have Americans that are, really patriotic, but it's interesting the way that the film personifies what those individuals look like, because they essentially, to me, they kind of come across as at least the way that the film handles it, but it kind of almost seems like an allegory for white supremacy.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I don't want to get into all that because I tried to avoid big politics conversation, but that's how they act. That's how white supremacists act. And there was actually a Nazi in the movie early on in the truck, and the people like that, that's what they want. They won't be able to get away with that, and it's stupid, but that's just people. That's how they live, and it's really dumb.
What do you think that, like, and I mean, neither one of us are kind of in any way involved in white supremacy, and we always try to kind of keep it out. And here, Victims and Villains, we're coming off a month where we crafted content that was specifically looking at the Black experience and highlighting Black creators and partnering with terrific creators like The Ghouls Next Door, Michaud Mission, Lucy Eden, who is a romance novelist, Black Women Are Scary, and so on and so forth. And so I digress, and I say all of that to say that, like, we don't tolerate racism at all. But it's also interesting the way that people interpret racism in different media. And in The Purge in particularly, the first Purge is a great example of, how you have how that film uses race relations to kind of make, quote, The Purge a success. And, this film opens up on Adele and Juan that are trying to come to America after the cartels have kicked them out of Mexico, and basically what ends up happening is they come to America, and you have all of that friction that happens between Dylan and Juan, and their journey of kind of staying on the same ground, I thought was beautiful. It was definitely a good emotional foundation for having everything, but with the themes of kind of white supremacy, or the people that just kind of really felt like one night a year wasn't enough, and they were entitled to more. They were entitled not to be. I like the way that is it Kirk? Yeah, I want to say Kirk. I like the way that he put it. People like me are powerless and penniless, and so now you're going to feel with it. And that's kind of our jumping off point into this Forever Purge journey. And I love the monologue that Will Patton's character has, where he's like, who came up with the Purge? It was rich white guys in Washington, D.C., and they did it basically as a way to take out like lower class areas, and basically you're just kind of doing their bidding. And so it's this like cycle of ignorance that we have almost kind of sometimes when it comes to things like government and politics and I would even also say race relations, that the Purge brings up a great point. And I think that's one of the things that I found so compelling about Dylan's character, was that he really kind of had this like idea in his brain, and the relationship and the journey that he has to go with Juan and his family and his own family to Mexico to escape the Forever Purge really awakens something anew within him, that what he's been taught isn't necessarily a 100% reality.
Oh yeah, and being in Texas, you're raised a lot on a lot of that stuff, and like just dipping into my background, like my family has a small history of like racism and homophobia, and my family, my side, like my immediate, like we have come so far from that, all of us together, and it's just things that's happened, and things we've went through, and people we've gotten close to, and people we've trusted, and just like you really can't go off of the old ways, because it's like the argument people give between New Testament and Old Testament, like the white picket fence days. No, like that was dead. That's stupidity. Like today, you got to open your mind, like Dylan did, go and do that with Juan. And I just want to say, Josh Lucas, great, fantastic character.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Josh Lucas as an actor feels like really nostalgic for me. Because I think for us, like, he was kind of starting to come into his prominence right around the time that he was like the early 2000s, because he did like Sweet Home Alabama, and then he did Hulk, which kind of aren't great movies, but like when you're growing up and being like a 10-year-old, like, they're really great. He was such a great villain in Hulk. But I think here, like, he kind of like just stopped popping up, and then like every once in a while he still pops up, and when he does, let me just tell you that he has my attention because of kind of that nostalgic factor. But it was really great to kind of see him come in to play such a complex character and really kind of return to such a hot property, or such a popular domain, and he did a great job as Dylan.
Oh yeah, he did fantastic. What should you say about Sweet Home Alabama? That's a touchy subject in this state, boy. But yeah, he was fantastic. And I really enjoyed, he was kind of short-lived. I loved Will Patton in this movie a lot. Just the dialogue he had in the short time he was in the movie was just it really showed the character, because like he even admitted to one point that he didn't teach Dylan the right ways that he should have, and it's just like that was really good to see that vulnerability and that honesty from Will Patton's character with Juan.
I think that goes back to the idea that you were just talking about how each generation is kind of different. We have these ideas of what, quote, the American dream, or to, as he puts it, to be a real American. And then at one point he says to Juan, he's like, I'm not even sure I know what it means to be a proud American anymore, because I think that there's not that I've ever been like a overly patriotic person, but I over the last year, like, learning more about kind of how American history has really suppressed a lot of stories from a lot of minority groups. It's been like, man, like, I don't know how I feel about telling people that, like, I'm an American. Like, I'm still kind of like struggling. Like, am I proud to be here? It's just kind of by chance that I'm here, and that's the first time that I've ever admitted that to someone on air. But I think that his vulnerability with Juan in that moment, about maybe I failed as a parent, but at that time he was just kind of doing what he was raised. He was a product of that American dream generation, and so that teaching got passed down to Dylan, which is subsequently going to get passed down to his daughter. But I think also with the events that he experiences in the Forever Purge, he's definitely going to be different than his father. But that vulnerability that he talks about, not knowing what it means to be a proud American, I think really, for, like you said, like, for as little bit of screen time as he has, he definitely makes such a strong impact in this first act. And that monologue and probably that moment with Dylan, or sorry, with Juan, is probably my favorite moments in these films.
Yeah, that's definitely one I took away from. And I want to share a story real quick, because his character really reminds me of my great grandfather, my Papa Charlie, and he's known in the community to be one of the first people within like our small North Jefferson area to let someone of color sit at the lunch table at a very well-known steel plant. And the story is, they were all eating lunch one day. They hired a guy who was black, and he walked by them with his tray. My Papa Charlie gets up, he pulls the chair out, goes, "Here." And the guy was like, no, you don't want an N-word like me sitting there. He goes, "Look, me and you bleed the same color blood. Sit down." And like, that was a story that's been told for years, and it's just like, to me, that was like the changing ground for my family, was my great grandfather stepping up and doing that, and it affected the community both ways. People was touched by it, people were sickened by it, which sickens me that people are like that. And just seeing Bill Patton's character remind me of my great grandfather a lot, because he really did plant those seeds in our family.
And I think for having someone like Juan show up and really kind of impact their life in that way, it was really interesting, because you can kind of see the way that he treats him in that first act, where there's a scene in particular where he's riding around and they're all taking the horses for a walk, and he's like, "Hey Juan, I heard you were late this morning. If you were late again, I'm gonna have to fire you." And he just very talks down to him, and it's that breaking point when they're on the way to Mexico in the truck, where we talked about earlier, where you really kind of get to see where he's kind of coming from. I don't necessarily would consider him a outright racist, but I would consider him a product of environments that have taught him, as he says, skin tone, people of race, and should just stick to their own race. And I love the way that that scene in particular is juxtaposed to Adele's description of America, where she talks about America being this melting pot. She's like, if you want to work in Spain, if you want to if you want to learn Spanish, you can come to America. If you want to learn Mexican, you can come to America. If you want to learn about
Japanese, you can come, if you want to try different cultures, like you can come here if you want to learn different histories. Anything you can do in America. And I love that juxtapose portions from someone that was actually raised in America versus what someone actually thinks of America.
You saying that reminded me of the episode of Drake and Josh, where Josh had his pen pal coming down from a different country, and Drake goes, "We can show her American things like Chinese and Mexican food."
I mean, let's be real. Like, it's not technically that off, man. I mean, they even point to it in the film where Adele says something along the lines of, like, one of their friends making Mexican food. She's like, yeah, he doesn't know how to make burritos. Like, it's the way that he makes burritos are not the way that Mexicans make it. And the way that, we do Chinese food. Netflix used to have a great documentary called Searching for General Tso. And it was such a compelling documentary because it explores not only the origin of the dish and the background of who General Tso actually was, but at the same time, it also gives clarification on how traditional, like, actual Japanese dishes are interpreted into American.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, like, we have neighbors, a Mexican family lives across the street from my grandfather, and they invite us pretty often to eat with them, and like the way that like they make their food compared to like Mexican restaurants is just so different and so much better, honestly. I don't want to get in a food tangent to get them starving, and I might have to go to Taco Bell after this.
Taco Bell's got to be one of the most American fast food joints ever.
Oh no, you're right, it is that. But that $5 box you can create on the app, man, that's the American dream.
Man, your stomach afterwards is going to hate you. It's going to be purge and purify your colon.
Yes. Yes.
I think that to get back to this movie, we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but it's interesting that this film is so heavily themed towards immigration, which. Do you feel like there was like an uprise in the immigration conversation when Trump took office?
Like it became more of a thing to like seek out immigrants, stuff like that. Like
no, like so like what I mean is like I always knew that it was kind of like an issue that we were talking about in political circles, but I feel like it reached like a new level of conversation once Trump did, because one of Trump's platforms was we're going to build a wall and it's going to separate the U.S. border and the Mexican border, and that was his thing that he was going to that was one of his biggest platforms that he was running for. The U.S. is for U.S. and the immigrants need to stay in their own countries, and I digress because I don't want to, get too politically correct here. But do you feel like there was like, I guess what I'm asking is like, do you feel like there was like a rise with, immigrants and specifically like hatred towards immigrants when he was in office?
Oh yeah, because like the people who are conservative and are Republican, they were wanting a leader who will go on to say things like that, say outlandish things like that on social media and in public. And it's like, because you had Trump in the office fighting for that, it created an uproar. And like, dude, I mean, like, we don't want to get into all that, but I thought it was just completely, like, there are so more important things you could do. Seriously.
Well, so I don't want to like specifically like just look at like his presidency and be like, oh yeah, like there was like a singular focus on this, because Trump did a lot of good during his time as a president.
Yeah,
and
unemployment was at an all-time low, and there were so many jobs. I mean, economic-wise, he did his part, but everything else was a big mumbo jumbo.
But what I want to say is, I feel like more than any other president that we've seen in our lifetime is
you had a lot of like Trump supporters, and I feel like those that supported Trump in particularly, like their constant or like one of their go-tos about why they voted for him or why they believed in him was his immigration policy. And so like that's what I'm asking is like, do you feel like those that supported Trump really kind of brought this topic of immigration into a more of like a mainstream light? Like it's not just reserved for politics anymore and those that are affected by it, but now it's something that is being talked about in mainstream circles.
Okay, yeah, now I get, yeah, absolutely. I think it definitely sparked that to be more of a common thing, just like every other issue has been now. I mean, if you wouldn't have had Trump's run and everything, we might not have had this movie the way it was, So yeah, I think it did bring it in the mainstream a lot more.
Because and like me and you, like we come from like two of the similar like paths when it comes to like politics. Like we don't ever want to outright like engage in political conversations because I think that both of us try to avoid those types of conflicts because of the ripples and divisions it causes. But I feel like at the same time, like I don't remember anyone before 2015 really talking about immigration, with like the exception of like people that actually were facing it or that were kind of going through the citizenship process. And then all of a sudden you have this 2016 election and boom, it's like it's on newsstands, it's more in the American conscious than it was before, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention to it.
Oh no, I agree with you. Yeah, I can't remember a time before 2016 that it was such a hot topic myself, so I'm right there with you, man.
I feel like this film does a great job at really placing immigration into it holds nothing back, and I feel like that's what makes this film so incredibly just amazing, is the fact that it doesn't hold anything back, that it is presenting you everything and how it feels about having the way that we as Americans kind of like to go back or to earlier feel entitled to be an American and like our land, this is our land. The Purge's theme song is this is our land. That's the whole thing. And while the series has explored other countries coming in for the Purge night, this is the first time that we've ever actually seen an outright film that is solely just engrossed with the concept and the thematic elements of immigration and kind of really not only how we as Americans process it, but also at the same time how those that are fleeing to this country process it. One of my favorite movies from last year was Yellow Rose. Yellow Rose showed the mental health struggle of Hispanic people that are coming to America from other countries just because of circumstances and the fear that they live in, and then also how it affects families being torn apart. And I think that this film does that to a degree, because there is that scene where you do have that whole subsection where Adele and Juan are separated and then they reconnect, and it's like, man, like it's really scary, especially on something like the Purge to go through.
Man, I really hope Darius is okay. You didn't really see him after they broke apart. Or did I miss that?
No, I think he actually was. I don't think he actually lived. So, but apparently, according to this, that actor Sami Rabati was actually in BVS.
Wait, he was? General something.
General Anab Shabi? I don't know.
Huh. He was in Mars too. I was looking through IMDb. Like a lot of the actors in this movie did do some stuff, some small. Like the guy who played Juan was in a movie that the director actually directed. That's not really well known, but so I feel like a lot of these people were kind of like close friends of the director, which they did good jobs. Honestly, I haven't seen the guy that played Juan in a movie before. I really enjoyed him. Like I'd like to see him in more movies for sure.
So, so he is the guy that Lois Lane is interviewing in the beginning of the movie that talks about the drones passing over at night.
Oh,
I thought that's who he might be. But go check out our episode on BVS. But to your point, yeah, I really enjoyed Juan. I thought that the gentleman who played him, whose name I'm gonna pronounce right now and probably butcher it, Tanak Herta. Probably mispronounced that. If I did, I'm super sorry. But yeah, I really enjoyed him in this. I haven't seen him in anything. I know that he's really famous, most famous for the Narcos spinoff from Narcos Mexico. I haven't actually watched it yet. I know that he has a lot of credits to his name as far as Spanish goes. But I haven't actually seen him do anything outside of this film, and much like the actor that played Sub-Zero in Joe Tasing, I think is his name, the guy who played Sub-Zero in this year's Mortal Kombat movie, I think that he's naturally a Japanese actor, and he comes over to do films in the States occasionally, but I kind of hope it's the same for this guy as well. To your point, I really enjoyed his performance. It was very emotional, very strong, and just he has such a commanding presence on screen.
Says he's rumored to be in Black Panther Wakanda Forever on IMDb, so that'd be cool.
I don't think it's rumored anymore. I think, I think this is the gentleman that's supposed to play Neymar, if I remember correctly.
Oh, dude. Oh, man. Yeah, that's awesome. Good for him.
I don't actually know if that's actually been confirmed, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that's who he's supposed to be playing. But I'm gonna say this too, and for all the listeners out there, the Forever Purge is the best Purge movie in my opinion. Brandon, I'm excited to kind of see what happens once you reach the end of this journey and kind of how you rank things, because they're all of these films are very well done in their own right, but I think when this film engages in its political themes is when it's at its strongest.
Well, I'll say when I saw the first Purge film, I wasn't super excited to watch the rest. And then Josh was like, no, dude, the rest are fantastic. They get better from there. And then seeing this film, like, I'm so high on this film. It's my number 2 of the year so far. I am very excited to go back and watch these other films. Probably something we'll do over the course of the next week. So I will definitely let y'all know my rankings for them, because I am super thrilled and excited to watch these films for the first time.
Well, I think that's going to do it for us on this episode of Victims and Villains. But before we go, I guess there's one more thing I want to talk about. This ending, I've never left a film, with the exception of Infinity War, kind of not only feeling like really jacked, but also feeling really hopeless, where it basically ends on like a shot of, cities burning basically, and this film is supposed to be the last film in the series, but during the press runs, franchise creator James DeMarco has said that there is a possibility for more installments, and this film definitely has an open ending. So do you think that this is the kind of like the perfect conclusion to a series like The Purge, or that we should see more?
Well, I don't want it to get ran in the ground like like Fast and the Furious, which is something I do love. So I think the way it ended would be perfect conclusion. I think it truly left it is. But I mean, the dude's done really well with writing everything, so he might come up with something completely different. I mean, hey, he could end his chapter of writing a horror series and write like the next hot romantic sci-fi series or something. You know, you never know these kind of people.
Are you saying that you don't want the Purge in space?
I do want the Purge in space. I want them with Ludacris and Tyrese Gibson in space. That's what I want.
Why do they look like minions?
What I really would want is LL Cool J from Too Fast, Too Furious and Ludacris in space. That's a whole movie.
Nah, I need the LL Cool J character.
Ja Rule. Yeah, there you go.
I need the LL Cool J character who is a security guard by day and a erotic fiction writer by night, reading it to his wife in H2O. I don't know if you've ever seen Halloween H2O, but yeah, he's got to be one of the best parts of that movie.
Oh, dude, which one was Buster Rhymes in?
Oh, that was Resurrection.
Oh, he came on WWF SmackDown when that came out. It was like, and The Rock interviewed him like, so what you doing this summer, Buster? I'm kicking Michael Myers' ass. Okay, that didn't happen. That's great.
Oh man, if I've ever had a more cringeworthy ending to any movie, it was that movie. Go check out our episode on Halloween Resurrection as well. But anyways, Brandon, where can people find you online?
Here at Twitter at Brendan W. Miller, Instagram at The Changing of Times, for your Under Oath fans out there. Yeah.
I want someone to tweet to us and like let us know your favorite Under Oath song. I know that's a really weird thing to say, but I feel like no one is like emo like me and you are, but then I know that there's like a whole bunch of emo kids. I just want to know how many of our listeners are emo kids.
Yeah, and if any of y'all are coming to Furnace Fest in September and you need someone to meet up with, if you don't know anybody in Alabama, I live 30 minutes away from where it's going to be. I'll be there. Hit me up. I'll hang out with you.
It's true, he will. That's how we met.
Yeah.
You guys can find me over at Instagram and Letterboxd as well. I'm at Captain Nostalgia, and you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net where you guys can find past episodes, all of our social media, including Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. Make sure that you guys like, follow, and subscribe, and you guys can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi as well, all of which you guys can find in the links below wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode, and most importantly, you guys can find our mental health resource library. So until next time, remember to purge and purify.